And this is a very important process that we're going to learn. Do you happen to remember one of the things that we learned last week is to let your children maintain their dignity. So like for instance, if you do have to spank your child, don't make them go back out in public while they're still crying. Let them get it pulled together, you know. Or when you reprimand your child and they're ashamed of themselves and they, it's like, don't make them, well, straighten up, you know, and whatever. It's like, give them a chance to get it together. Give them a chance to have some dignity, even when they've been corrected. So now that is to, there are limits to that as well. If your child decides after they've been corrected that they're now going to punish you in the rest of the world by squalling and bawling or whatever they're doing, then it's like, well, that's not dignity. So that needs correction in itself. But we're giving a child the opportunity to have dignity and get themselves pulled back together, whatever. Especially once a child is 5 or 6 years old and they get a spanking, probably pull them away from the rest of the family and the other kids if you're going to spank them. Or even if you're just going to really give them the what for, you know, have a little come to Jesus meeting with them. It's, you know, let them have the dignity, pull them aside so that they can maintain their dignity in that situation. You'll get further with them. Because shame is not an effective corrective tool or discipline tool. Shame is not what we're trying to put on our children. What we want to put on our children is peace. Because when their heart is correct and they're reconciled to us, then there's a peace that comes with that. And so that's why we have to give our kids the opportunity to recover with dignity. So sometimes when we give our kids instruction, or even sometimes when we give our kids correction, we're wrong because we didn't think it through, or because we didn't have all the information, or because maybe the other parent had given the kid conflicting instruction. And so when we give an instruction to our child and there's something that's conflicting in them, then they have to have a way of reconciling that conflict. Otherwise, we drive them to exasperation. And the Bible says, fathers, don't exasperate your children. So there's a sense of justice that's in every heart, and it's in the heart of our children as well. And so if we don't give an avenue for our children to be able to deal with the conflict, then it's going to exasperate them. So that's what the appeal process does. So, children, obey your parents, for this is well pleasing to the Lord. And fathers, do not exasperate your children, Colossians 3:21. So we have to bridge these two commands. The appeal process allows you as parents to rightly exercise your authority while saving your children from unnecessary what?
Frustration.
Frustration. Did you guess?
No, well, I had listened to it, but I didn't. I was like, oh, I missed filling it in, so I was like, but I'm pretty sure they said frustration.
That'll work for me.
Yep.
Okay. So how does the appeal process work? To activate the appeal process, the child must initiate the conversation with the parent by providing new information. Realizing that yes, no, and maybe are all possible answers. So, guidelines for making an appeal. The appeal process is only for children who are old enough to understand the concept and who are characterized by first-time obedience. So the appeal process is very different than why.
Because I said so.
Why needs to be dealt with because that is not an appeal, that's a protest. The appeal must be made to the parent currently giving instruction. That is, if dad is instructing, the child cannot take his appeal to mom. Because that is called pitting parents. Parents should only entertain an appeal when a child comes in humility. Appeals can only be made once. In other words, a child cannot repeat or plead his case. Start by teaching your child to use the exact phrase, "May I appeal?" Yeah, that's okay. But if you want to alter that, it'll work. It'll still work. Because you know your kids and what they're characterized by. So if you give your child instructions and he says, but Dad, did you know? To me, that's the same as appeal as saying, Father, may I appeal? I'm not saying that's not good. That will work, but if your children are characterized by first-time obedience, and they're characterized by not arguing, then if they say, "Hey, but Dad, did you know?" I'm gonna be like, "What?" So anyway, that's for you to sort out in your house how you're gonna do it.
I think that's an important statement, though. I got the same flavor when I watched the video. It's a little like magic wordy, and
right.
People don't necessarily talk that way, and
right.
Might have to install an HR department in your
right. Yeah. Make sure there's some DEI going on. And
I need a written complaint. It goes in the bin under the sink.
That actually diffuses everything if you actually said that. I need it in writing.
The appeal process is a the appeal process, I'm on F, is a what?
privilege.
Is a privilege, not a way to avoid objectionable task or to get out of personal responsibility. The appeal process is to work if the appeal process is to work effectively, parents must be fair and flexible. Think about why you say no. Is there a good reason that it cannot sometimes be yes? So teaching your children to make an appeal. Sit down with your children, work through the principles, examples, and guidelines of this lesson. Set up a few scenarios that might fit your family situation. Include in each example how to correctly and incorrectly make an appeal. Once your children have mastered the concepts, test them. Allow the natural consequences of wrong choices to reinforce your training. The appeal process helps make obedience attractive. What we're really talking about is understanding the sense of justice that is born in the heart of every child. And if a child genuinely feels that a situation is unjust, that exasperates the child. Makes them feel like that they can't trust you, so they only obey you out of obligation and not out of a love of virtue or a delight in delighting you. So that's why we want justice to be served, and not, that's not how I would say it. We want justice to be observed in our families, so that our children feel like they can trust us. Now, the appeal process can't really be observed if our children aren't characterized by first-time obedience and by a willingness of heart. So before you ever start to think about even talking about the appeal process, already established first-time obedience and non-argumentative children. So I think the appeal process could start as young as 5 or 6, but I think it's more likely that it's for children that are over 6 or 7 years old and they're past the point of needing a spanking anymore, and they've learned how to handle what we've already learned so far in the book, and now they're good kids, and so they have to be able to have a way to make sure that everything is just when you give them instruction and your instruction is wrong or contradictory to the other parent's instruction, or to a situation. It's like, run over and get the mail. May I appeal? What? Well, there's a truck coming.
Get it anyway.
Slide. So I think it should probably center around how are we doing in the process of first-time obedience? How are we doing in the process of teaching our children not to argue, and the other issues that are preliminary to this process? And I'm looking around thinking, well, your kids are old enough to learn this process. Maybe your older one might be close to it, but as far as comprehension, Rowan maybe, but probably not. How old is he? 4?
He's 4. He could probably comprehend it, but that he would abuse it.
I want to peel. I want to peel. I want to peel. You're about to get peeled.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking on it too. I think that there is a little bit more work I think that we need to do first and then bring that up to him. I mean, I think he's close. I do. But like, I feel like with, the first time obedience stuff, like, he does pretty well, but I think that, what do you think?
He could do better.
He could do better. I feel like he should, he could be a little bit
more consistent.
Yeah, more consistent, because it's kind of like,
because he does do so much stuff that is so great, but there's still, I think we still have a little bit more work to do before that.
Yeah, for sure.
There's some kids that are they're just blatantly disobedient. You tell them don't go out the door and they just go out the door. And then there's other kids that are passively disobedient. You tell them not to go out the door and they just stand in the doorway. They're both being disobedient. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the passive disobedience is almost worse because it's insidious. It's like sometimes you can't see it as easily, and so it's like a rot at the core that has to be, that can be more hidden, mm-hmm. But it has to be excised. So yeah, of course yours is, yours is still hands-on.
So rebellious.
But he's getting there.
You just wait.
Start to get mouthy.
Yeah, I have an appeal. One more milk.
Yeah. It's a good thing they don't know how to use firearms.
Ready for bed. Thank
So, talking to your kids about these principles. So, on chapter 16, we've had 16 major principles. Of these 16 chapters, which principles have jumped out at you the most? Yeah, look through the index.
Well, after our conversation, I feel like the first time obedience one like really stood out to me because I feel like that's like the core of everything. Like if you don't have that down, then the rest of it's not really gonna flow. But then I think there was like a trust chapter in there where it was talking about like how you respond and like how you. It was one of the first ones. I don't know. How you respond and you react and being able to like read your child to diffuse the situations. That one really stood out to me too because it's like there's a lot of you work in parenting.
Yeah.
There were two chapters that took me several times through before I realized, oh, these are more significant than I realized, and I hadn't even really picked up on it. The first one was probably still yet to come in our studies, but it has to do with the transfer between control and relationship. And so, you know, my kids were at home, they're like 15, 16, 17 years old, and I'm still being like, control is, you know, when I tell you to do something, then just do it. And it is true, but I should be like, if I tell you to do something, it's because of my relationship with you, not because if you don't do it, I'll put you in the baby seat and whatever, you know. So I kind of missed that, especially for Madison. She was already old enough that, and was characterized by first-time obedience and characterized by a good heart. But one day Jennifer sat me down and reminded me that I needed to transition, and that was a big deal. So, and that was after I'd, you know, had this class probably 8 or 10 times. So my point being that the concepts are so many that sometimes it's, you know, it's normal if you want to review from time to time. The other one that I think is important that oftentimes I think we generally miss, not just me, but everybody in the class, and that is one of the first concepts that we talked about, and that is central to good parenting is a solid relationship between mom and dad. That is the primary relationship in a family, to which children are a welcome addition, but we have to remember that the primary relationship is between mom and dad. So that's, we can get so embroiled in the process of wanting our children to do what they're supposed to do and raising the kids that even in an effort to do the right thing for our kids, they still get center stage and we become a child-centered parenting style. So we don't want to lose track of the forest because of the trees. And we were talking about this in our church staff meeting today as well. It's like sometimes you lose track of the big picture of why we're doing this whole thing, why are we even having church when you're so busy making sure that the nursery has somebody covering it and the bathrooms are going to get cleaned and all of the things that have to happen in order to keep the church functioning, the machinery of having church. It's like it's necessary. You have to think about it and do it. But at the same time, you have to keep track of this bigger picture of why we're doing it, what it's all about. That's the same thing in parenting. So protect that relationship. And one way to protect it, especially those of you with little kids, is don't let that child sleep in your room any longer than is absolutely necessary. And is necessary at first, because otherwise you got to get up and, there's just some practical things about a newborn, and having them in a bassinet beside your bed is, but the 3-year-old that still nurses and is sleeping in his mom and dad's bed, that's not a good plan. That's hard on the husband-wife relationship, little rascal. It's like there's just some, and we chuckle about that, but I've had in more than one case that was a problem with, it's like, but well before that is just the issue of having children in your personal space. So, for instance, not just sleeping in the bedroom. That is a big issue. You want to get your children sleeping in their own room as quickly as is reasonable. I mean, and even after they're sleeping in their own room, there are times when they get scared and they come in, and it's not it's not the worst thing in the world if they sleep in your room or even in your bed with you, but that should not be the norm. But I think that it's really important for the husband-wife relationship that you establish a bedtime for your children that is significantly earlier than mom and dad, so that you can just have a couple hours of sanity, just so that you can have a normal adult conversation without being pawed and clawed upon. And so make it a practice to put your children to bed earlier than you go to bed. You're like, well, if I do, they're going to wake up at 5 a.m. Well, but it's still worth it. So you may be having one of these adult conversations with your spouse, but it's still better. Give yourself at least an hour. Give yourself at least an hour when the kids go to bed before you do. And then going to bed, I'm talking about, they really did. Not still the war between the living room and the bedroom.
The whole hour is just a war.
Right. The whole hour is
and
a...
they finally went to bed at the same time you're going
Right.
to bed.
But I'm, it's like, Father, may I appeal? So what I'm telling you is not a law cut in stone. I'm just saying this is one of the things that is practical in protecting the husband-wife relationship. So give yourself that evening time. Will you be able to make it if you didn't do that? Well, yeah, but it's just a good idea.
Yeah, the couch time chapter. Like, I always knew that, like, the parents having time was important, but I didn't realize how deep it went, like, making insecurities in your child or whatever. Or,
right.
like, even if we know that we're spending time together, to make it a point to do it in front of the kid.
Right.
That because, like, we could feel like, I would just thought, well, as long as we know that we hung out at whatever point, but then to read that, like, well, you need to do some of that in front of your kid too.
And that's a 10 or 15 minute session.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you that couch time is that was the worst thing for me as far as actually getting it accomplished.
It's hard to actually sit down.
As far as sitting down on the couch.
Yeah.
I'm not as bad as I used to be, but not much of a sitter downer. Mm-hmm. And so again, each household is going to tweak with this stuff in the way that as long as you don't lose the heart of what it is. I would go in and just linger in the kitchen while Jennifer was making dinner. Just talking, hand her something now and then, whatever she needed or whatever. but just kind of hanging out in the kitchen while she was making dinner, and accomplish that same look, kids, we're having a good relationship. We're enjoying each other's company while the kids, and part of my job in that was to keep the kids out of the kitchen.
You go
So-
in and then they all come in and then
It's like,
Jennifer's like, go to the other room. You know?
it's like, we're talking, kids, go out. Go out in the living room. Mom and I are talking. So those are a couple of concepts that I think can easily get overlooked. All right, back to you again. What concepts jumped out at you?
Probably the couch time as well. Not to just steal from everybody else, but I guess that's what happens when you go last. But that was, yeah, like you said, it's like you don't realize, like some of the examples that they brought up, it's crazy that was the connection between this totally unrelated issue that they were having with the child, and then couch time fixed this insecurity that they were having.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think definitely we're gonna have to take this again, because I am a hands-on learner, and there's definitely a lot of the stuff that we can learn, because to be fair, most of it is, well, actually all of it is training for us. We're reading it, but like a lot of it is training for the parents and building that relationship, and so we were able to kind of practice that and put that into practice. But then a lot of the hands-on, teaching this lesson to a child. I mean, we make jokes about it. Like Aaron's he's 6 months old, so we're not
Right.
doing a lot. So, yeah.
That's good. You guys are getting that foundation before, like that way you can just start.
Mm-hmm.
And so he doesn't know any different, and neither do you. So you have to work backwards.
Yeah.
Well, I would challenge you and encourage you to have a parenting class at your house and use the videos. Now, I know that you don't get the bonus material and the sparkling personality of having me as your teacher, but going over it with another couple or two couples in your home is super valuable for you as a review, and it's valuable for them as well. So if you find a couple, or even just one other couple, and just say, hey, let's go over this stuff, and it's good for establishing some really deep friendships too.
Yeah, so a couple that I really liked though was, honestly the first one was how to raise a moral child. Like that, I mean, I still, I'm like, man, I'm still building my moral warehouse as however old I am. But the concept of it is so great, like me growing up, nobody really told me I learned some stuff, but not really, so it's just stuff that recently I've been trying to build myself. But and then respect for like peers and people's property, like when little kids come over and you're held hostage, like that is the absolute worst thing ever. They just come and break your nice stuff. Yeah, just tear through your house. It's like horrible. So I really like that one a lot. I'm like, I have been a victim and do not like it.
I will not have my child.
Yeah.
Will not have my child hold their other hostesses hostage. What jumped out at you?
Well, the last three, yeah, I forgot my book today, so that was great. The discipline issues, and also consequences and punishment also for me, because they're a little older and I have older stepkids, and so I kind of did it in reverse. I did it with kids that weren't mine first, and then transitioned to my other ones. And so my relationship, and they know that because they're family, but I have a really good relationship with my older stepdaughters and with Dexter, who's living with Justin, and he's here now, and he's not in the Midwest, and I have talks with him every Tuesday about getting to church and whatever else it may be. But this was eye-opening because I used to get on my boys a lot, and the exasperation thing, I just beat it and be like, no, you need to listen, and just they'd be frustrated, and this was more of an eye-opener, and it's like, oh, that's an everyday thing that I'm having to deal with because I don't have anybody else in the house helping me. So it's like, well, it's on me, and my mom probably wrote this book, so I have that to be thankful for because she has a lot of this stuff that's just already ingrained, and I don't have to really search around, and that's how I grew up too. It was always, this is the consequence, this is what it is, this is how you deal with it, and it's always like a talk it out thing, and so she's helping with my boys too. So this has been really good, but the last few is just like a real world type of thing for me. And yeah, what was the other one there? Yeah, and it's just interesting because mom's not here, so having to have that disconnect,
Right.
and how to deal with that to where she knows where I stand is kind of hard, just because you don't really agree with much, but
Right.
but she knows what it is, and she knows what I'm doing, so it's just kind of
And when they get back, you just have to debrief them.
yeah, it's kind of
Right.
like that. It's just not really not what I'm doing, and then I get back in here, it's like a couple days, and then they're back on track, so
Yeah.
it's easier than it has been. But yeah, this has been really helpful too. But I have a lot of help with family too, so this is just
That's cool.
really good. So yeah, it's been a good deal.
How about you?
Oh, I wasn't aware we were. One of the things that strikes me in this last chapter kind of hit that home here at the end, 16, where it's in number 5, where it says teaching your children to make an appeal. It's a whole manual on setting up the appeal,
Right.
and in triplicate. And one of the things that strikes me about this entire book and this system is this is realistically just common sense as a Christ follower on how to raise a child.
Right.
And
It's common sense written down systematically.
Exactly. And when how do I put this into words? The number one thing, and you just hit on it earlier, is a house divided can't stand. And you just mentioned it because a lot of people who are married and haven't been divorced and haven't co-raised a child, because you're not really co-raising a child, you're raising a child together. It shouldn't be co-raising. It should be one person, basically, one body raising a child together in unison. When you're raising a child with somebody that's completely antithetical to what you're trying to teach them, or resistant to it, it's very difficult. So you understand the dynamic of having a husband and wife that agree with each other, because the first thing a child will do is pick out the weakness and separate two people if they can. So this whole thing is working together on all of the concepts. I think that's just so important. It can't be said enough. And making the relationship, the husband and wife relationship, the primary focus of, or the foundation would be the better word, the foundation of this system. Because if you have that unity and everything comes from that, and you discuss it and you work together at it, and you don't always agree all the time, but you find a place to agree and go forward in that.
And if you'll teach your wife the appeal process.
No, in the appeal process, it's funny because you bring that appeal process up. Some of the stuff that I hear just comes to me, flows naturally.
Right.
You're parenting a child. It's not like my child will say, Your Honor,
Right.
Can I come to the bench? Can I,
And
sidebar.
I say that tongue in cheek, teach your wife the appeal process. But the fact of the matter is, we do need to learn to appeal to our spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes they don't know all of the details. They don't know the other pressures that are upon us as to why we are doing what we're doing, or sometimes we don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. And sometimes when we're in a discussion, because we never fight, it's sometimes important to be able to say, well, there may be a situation, circumstance here that you're unaware of, and introduce new information. Sometimes, in fact, a lot of times, new information is the ingredient that will settle the dispute, whatever it is. Because a lot of times we're at odds because we're not on the same page. Right. My page says this and her page says that.
Absolutely.
And so, if you don't have some new information, just make something up. I'm just kidding you.
Well, and it's funny because coming from a position of a grandparent now, okay, my wife and I have the kids together. My adult children went to a concert, and we had the kids late into the night one night. And it's amazing how quickly my wife forgets that I helped her raise 7 children. And I'm being coached on how to. I'm like, you do remember I'm the guy that
was there.
Yeah, they all lived, right? And I was part of that. So it doesn't end. It doesn't end as your children get older. As you have grandchildren, once again, you still have to be unified because you're helping raise these little people.
And those little people are giving you the same challenges that your own children did. That's I told Georgia, come back inside the door, because she had stepped out on the porch. Come back inside. She didn't want to, so I take a step towards her. So she comes back inside. I said, "Okay, come this way now." So her mom was going to go out the other door, out to the car. I said, "Come this way now." And she looked at me. She went around the island the other way, and I said, "Come this way. Your mom's coming out this door, and I want you to come this way." She went down the hall. Okay? Now, as grandpa, I'm left in a real lurch because she was blatantly disobedient to me.
Yep.
Okay? But mom's leaving. The other baby's already packed up. They need to get out the door. It is not the time for me to have this come to Jesus meeting with Georgia. I had to let Georgia win that one. But the only reason, and I think she knew it too, is because of the circumstances around, because they were leaving, because there wasn't time to deal with her. And she's a pretty smart little cookie. She knew that. But I was following her down the hall, and she was starting to cry, and her mom's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "She knows that she was disobedient to me, and she knows that she's in trouble with me, even though I haven't said anything to her." I said, and she is.
It's amazing they can feel the.
Because she knew she had done wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I just looked at her and I said, "Next time you're out here, you're going to do what Grandpa says." That was my parting shot. But
and I will prove it next time.
Yeah, and this time you're off the hook because you played me on this one. But I lost that battle with her. That means I have to regain that ground. But it's interesting, as grandparents, you don't have the same jurisdiction as you did with your own kids. So it's kind of like, that's the other thing I was asking myself is, okay, so since it's not my call here, I can't say you're not leaving right now until I deal with this kid.
Right. Shut it down.
Yeah, it's not my call.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also would be a good thing too, like in times like that, whoever the parent is, and knows like what happened or whatever, and they can say, "Hey, when you were at Grandpa's earlier, and he told you to do something that way."
Right, and she did. Morgan did that.
No, I mean, I would figure that
Yeah.
anyways, but I'm just saying. Like,
So
that
you're
would be
right.
another great thing that all the
Reinforce
people
the
are
authority.
all you
Yeah.
know, like, because I mean, she has to know when she's at your house. I'm just saying in general for whatever.
And you're right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And as grandparents,
That helps the grandparents.
we have to
Right.
acknowledge that this is not my child.
Yep.
This child belongs to that's her mom and that's her dad. They're ultimately responsible for this child, and so I just tattle on them.
Yeah.
Well, I had an interesting thing, and this is kind of a neat thing for me as a grandfather. I had William and Brinley out in the backyard a few days ago. They were playing. I think it was Sunday, and we were playing, running around, and they were playing good guy, bad guy, and just having a good time.
Oh, one of the best.
And
That's a good one.
and so one of my daughter's cats was outside, and William went up and stepped on the cat's tail. And Brinley, Brinley's a little bit older than William. Brinley says something to me about William just stepped on the cat's tail, and I saw him do it and I caught him. So I pulled him aside and I had a good talk with him, and I said, you need to look at me in the eye when we're talking. And I said, that's not right. You don't mistreat animals. And so I said, yeah, Pop, I don't. You're right. And so we talked about it, and I said, okay, next time you do that, I'm gonna have to go tell your mom and dad, and we're gonna have to deal with it in a different way. And he's 3, he understands, and so he sat there, and then Brinley says, I'm gonna go tell my mom, and so she heads for the back door. Well, he starts crying. Because it's like, and I said, William, I said, you're fine. I said, Brinley, you're not going to go tell your mom on William. Pop handled it. Everything's fine. You have to let it go. So, and then William was upset again. And I said, William, you have to trust me. We dealt with it. You did the right thing. You told me you were wrong. It's okay. It's good. And so I went inside, and he was there, and then he started crying again, and I had to go back out and reassure him again, because he knows he's not supposed to step on a cat's tail, and he doesn't want all the angels from heaven coming down on him. So I went in the house, and I told Taryn and Shauna that what had happened. Everybody inside had a kind of a giggle, and he's still sitting out on the porch. But the point of the story is that I had to make sure he trusted me. That when I told him it was okay, that somebody else wasn't going to come down on him later.
Right.
The beautiful end of the story was he ended up telling everybody what he had done, individually by himself. He went to my daughter, whose cat it was, and he said, Auntie Kay, I stepped on your cat's tail, I'm sorry. And then he went and told his mom that he stepped, dad later that he stepped on. And Taryn said that he kind of seemed proud of it when he told me, but he kind of had a little smile on his face when he said. But the point is that that's a win, because he confessed what he had done, but he had already dealt with it. So, and I got to tell Brinley not to be a tattle.
There you go.
Snitch it, yeah. That's where I was going with that one. Older brother, younger, yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah,
Can
it's his cousin.
Levi, will you hit the live feed and stop that? Where are we at on time?